and welcome to another TOG chat. I'm Bob Osborne. I'm principal of the Osborne Group, and I'm joined by my colleague Laurel McCombs. Hey, Laurel.
Hello.
I thought today we would get really practical because you and I often talk about theory and principles, and I think both of us really enjoy that. But I thought today we would talk about campaigns and just how do we know when we're ready to launch a campaign, or how do we get ready to launch a campaign. And it feels like a lot of our clients right now are starting to consider campaigns again. I think the economy is good, and so it feels like a good time to have this topic. So when you talk to your clients, Laurel, what are you looking for? What are sort of the prerequisites or the main prerequisites for being ready to launch a campaign?
Good question. So I think there's a lot, and I think there's probably a lot of things we'll talk about over the course of our little chat today. But I think the thing first and foremost is just knowing whether or not a campaign is the solution for what you are trying to solve. And, a lot of times I think folks can see campaigns as a silver bullet. I think a lot of folks want to, just kind of meet their annual operating budget and look at it. Well, let's run a campaign. And, I think ultimately when we think about a campaign, we're thinking about something that's kind of above and beyond. And we have clients who look at campaigns in a lot of different ways, whether it's a capital campaign for a building or a new space, or whether it's a capital campaign that's kind of, for a new strategic plan and augmented programs and projects. Or, we've had a couple of clients who are looking at, considerably maybe doubling, tripling their annual operating over the course of, 3 to 4 years. But in any of those scenarios, it's something that is significantly above and beyond what you're doing right now. And, ultimately, if you're going to go out and you're going to create a campaign that is for something above and beyond what you're doing now, you need a vision for what that thing is that you're going to do, and probably even more importantly, why you're going to do it. And this idea of what is it that we believe is going to be different in the world in 3, 4, 5, 10 years because we raised this money. That is not an insignificant question. And yet I feel like it is the second, third, fourth question that people ask themselves when they're thinking about going into a campaign. And if there was one thing I would say, it needs to be the very first question you're asking yourselves is, what is it that we're going to be doing that is significantly above and beyond what we're doing today? And what is going to be different because of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think a lot of times that, yeah, is secondary when people think about it, and really has to be primary. Like, I think the beauty of campaigns is that it gets everybody moving in the same direction, and so you really can accomplish something above and beyond, and something that's transformational to the organization potentially in some way, and the people that you serve. But you have to have a why. If there isn't a reason to do it, it can't just be, well, we really want some more money, which we all do, but there really has to be an outcome or outcomes associated with that money. And it has to resonate with people too, right? Like, and so, we definitely do feasibility studies here at the Osborne Group. And sometimes they're really necessary, but they're not always as needed as people might think, because what we're really trying to do is test our vision, right? Test our case for support, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But we need to know that whatever it is that we're talking about, whatever it is we're proposing, whatever outcomes that we're suggesting, and not just for the organization, but really it has to be framed in terms of the people that you serve, or something that resonates with the people that you're actually going to ask for money. This is a very practical exercise, a campaign. It's really like we have 100 people that we need to convince, or 200 people, whatever it is, and we need those specific people to give us money, and so we have to have something that is going to resonate with those people. But we'll circle back to that. But what we need to do first, so we have our why, we're excited, we have an outcome that's important to the organization, it's important to the people that we serve, and so now we're excited about it, we need to make it happen. And the next step we really need to think about is, okay, well, what is it going to take to happen in terms of resources, right? And thinking about roughly what is this going to cost if we could do if we could do everything we wanted to do, like what does this look like? And of course, the best way to determine, how the distance between yourself and, being able to raise the amount of money that you need and where you are today is to create a table of gifts, which, is both of um, our favorite things because we are just that nerdy. But it really is, as a practical matter, really, really important because the number one reason that any given, fundraising effort fails, particularly campaigns, is a lack of prospects. Do we have enough people? You can do everything right. You can do textbook major gift work, and have great systems and processes. And if you do not have enough people to ask, that to get engaged with your why and with your vision, then it's probably not going to work out. And you could do everything relatively wrong, but as long as you're engaging people, right, and you have enough people, there's a good chance that it'll ultimately work out. Although, it may be very inefficient and and cause other problems for the organization. And so really understanding what your prospecting situation is by creating a table of gifts, and really the gap between your where you are today and where you need to be to reach whatever that goal is that's attached to your vision, is a really, really important exercise. And it's okay if you don't have the people that you need today. Part of what makes a campaign powerful is to find those people, right, and find new volunteers and find new board members. But we at least want to understand, like, what does that situation look like for us? What is that gap? And then we can start to think about how to narrow that gap. So now we have our vision, we have our table of gifts. What do we need to do? What's next?
I think actually stemming from the table of gifts, one of the things I love about a table of gifts, and I mean, the 100 reasons I love a table of gifts, but one of my favorite things about a table of gifts is the way it can be a tool to engage other folks, right? So the next thing I really want to make sure is that my board, other donors, my volunteers, other potential kind of fundraising volunteers, people who may be on a campaign committee, are embracing, understanding the campaign, understanding the scope of the campaign, and understanding their role in this campaign. And I think actually a table of gifts becomes one of your best tools in helping to do that. Most boards, I think we've seen both, right, Bob, where we see some boards who will know very little about a campaign and be all in on it, and are just like, yeah, let's do this. I don't care how much it's for, or what it is. We're excited, right? And then we've seen other boards who have all the information in the world and are still kind of like, I don't know about this, right? So, and everything in between. And I think what a table of gifts does, particularly with your board, is it makes it very real. And it shows them not only this is what it's going to take for us to be successful in this campaign from a gifts perspective, from a prospects perspective, but it shows them very objectively, and here's what we need from you, right? So if this is the gap between where we are today in terms of the number of prospects we have and the number of prospects we need, this is where you're going to help us the most in this, right? And I think it just starts to make it more tangible for the board and for your potential capital campaign committee, other volunteers, other donors. I think it makes it more real. And it starts to, I think, give them real purpose. And, it's not this kind of nebulous big number, but now it's like, no, we need to identify 20 people who might give us $100,000, right? And so I think it just can really help with that. Of course, and I'd ask you other thoughts in terms of engaging the board and other volunteers, but I think that can be a really great way to kick that process off. And would probably be the next step I would take.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I would say that the table of gifts is useful for that very purpose, even beyond campaigns, right? Of just creating a sense of shared ownership, that this isn't just a director of development and the executive director's problem, but like, here's a shared goal that we can all work towards and try to hit. And it's a metric, right? It can easily be reported on. It can You can create a dashboard for it, and you can slowly kind of over the course of the campaign, or at least the initial phase of the campaign, start to identify those missing prospects. And so I love it as that tool, and it puts a really tangible um, metric and number to the more abstract notion of the campaign in the first place. So yeah, I think we'll talk more in a few minutes about how to engage the board. But for me, the next step after that is probably to start to, now the board is on board, at least in the abstract. They haven't said shut us down. And now let's start to thinking about, what is our case for support, and what does that look like? And I think the case for support is important as a document, but I think it's mostly important as a tool and as a way of forcing you to think about, well, what is your actual case? So to me, the most value you'll get out of creating a case for support actually is it forces you as an organization to really think deeply about, well, what is it that we're proposing? Why are we proposing it? What problem is it solving? What's the world we're trying to create? Why us? Why are we uniquely qualified to do this? What at the strategic level is it going to be required to realize this vision, and then make an ask? And so we use the table of gifts. I mean, sorry, the case for support, both as like a big C, like we'll have a case for support that we can use for different situations, but it forces us to think about articulating what it is that we're trying to propose, and then it forces us to test that case, right, and to talk to people about it, and to really see whether it's resonating with folks or not. To my earlier point, it doesn't really matter if your consultants love it, you love it, your board loves it. Like, it matters a little bit if your board loves it, because hopefully they'll be generating, generously giving to the campaign. But do the people that you're asking to invest with this campaign, does it resonate with them? And that's where it really becomes in as a tool, as a way of kind of testing and getting a sense of whether or not what you're proposing is something that people are going to invest in and start to support. So we put the case for support together. Now this is where maybe not you would want to have a feasibility study, right? So I would say, I'm going to sort of name for me what the reasons to have a feasibility study are, but maybe you have some some additional reasons. As I said before, I don't always think you have to do this. For me, you always have to test your case. You always have to see, is it resonating with the people that you hope to invest? Does it have to be consultants that are doing this? It doesn't, in our opinion. I think when there's genuine questions, like when you really are not sure whether, like, you're just proposing something that's so far afield or so different from what it is that you've traditionally done, where you might want some objective empirical information to go off of. I think that can be helpful. I think it can also be helpful when you are thinking about, like, maybe sometimes your board just wants to know, right? They just want the reassurance that we're going to be doing this big effort. Is this going to pay off? I think those for me are probably the two big reasons that I would probably do it. But I don't know, maybe you have other reasons to where you would consider doing a feasibility study.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it always has to be done. I think that there are plenty of times when organizations can test their own case with a small group of donors or with a big group of donors, or even kind of test it as they are doing some initial vision meetings and kind of engaging folks in the campaign in that work. But I agree with you on both. I think there's also been some times I've seen where a feasibility study has really helped when there might not conflicting messages in the case, but maybe there's like one, two, or three like pillars maybe of the campaign, and you've got folks who are like, no, this is the message we got to lean into, and other folks are saying, no, this is the message we got to lean into. And I think it can just help to get that feedback from outsiders. Again, to your point about, it doesn't matter what we like, right? I mean, it matters what we think is important, but how we're talking about it really can be driven. Yeah, and just it's interesting. I will share. I once did a feasibility study with an organization that, and hands down, the feedback was, we love this organization, we love everything they're doing, we will continue to support them, but I don't really see anything in this case for support that looks different than what they're already doing.
Mm.
And that
Yeah.
was like overwhelmingly the feedback that I heard from this feasibility study. And, so the organization went back and they retooled the case, and they really took it to heart, right? People aren't going to give more because they're not seeing in this case that vision, right? That kind of, what is that significant change from what we're doing today? And so things like that, I think when there is maybe a question, yeah, a feasibility study can be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it certainly can be. I think the point we're trying to make is it's expensive and it's not always necessary, but sometimes, if you're trying to do a big lift, it can be helpful. I mean, more information I think is often useful, right?
Well,
Um,
yeah, and I would make it also really clear what a feasibility study is not and what it doesn't do. And I think there
mm,
is a little bit of misconception out there that you're getting commitments from folks. Like I think we've heard from clients in the past, like, well, can you get a sense of how much they'll give to the campaign, right? Or and yeah, we show a table of gifts and we ask the question of, given what you've heard, how, where could you see yourself landing with this campaign? But it's not an ask, and certainly none of the donor strategy and engagement and all of that work has been done yet. And but I think too many folks want it to almost serve as like a preliminary ask for a campaign, and that's just not what it is. So if you're hoping to bring in consultants who are going to like do a preliminary ask
number.
for a campaign through a feasibility study, that is, or if you're looking to get hard commitments to the table of gifts, it's just not going to happen in the
Probably
feasibility.
the least useful
The
use
least useful thing.
of the
And
feasibility
the thing,
study.
I rarely have a donor who will say, "Oh, I'll give at this, I'll give right here," right? I mean, most people say like, "Well, I'd have to think about it, but we'd probably give more." Yeah, I mean, you get like vague statements, right? Like,
Yeah.
because nobody's going to tell a consultant in a feasibility study interview how much they're going to give to a campaign. And I wouldn't want them to, because it would likely be far lower than what you could actually get them to give once you've engaged them, brought them into a vision meeting, had some discussions with them, right? And then did a really proper good ask of them.
I'm ecstatic when we get a hard number that's actually in the range that we would want, because that's a great indicator, right? Like everybody's primed. That almost makes me think like, well, let's think about our goal. If we're getting those this early on, maybe we can do a little better. Okay, so we have our board is excited, our insiders are pretty excited, or at least indicate interest in the campaign. We have a strong vision for what this campaign is going to do. Now we have to start getting into the nitty gritty. We've decided like, okay, all indicators say go. Let's jump into this. And so I think there's a bunch of things that need to happen then. I think one of the biggest things is really to assess your current program, whether you use a consultant or yourself. But you're thinking about this goal that you're trying to achieve. You still need to do annual fundraising while you're achieving that goal, and that needs to be accounted for in some way. Which is why we would encourage all of you to do comprehensive campaigns where you're really thinking about the total annual giving during that time, and putting in some increases of that annual giving, and you're thinking about whatever the major gift total is for the campaign, and thinking about that all together comprehensively. And so that's going to take more resources, right? It's probably going to take more personnel resources. You're going to have to, it might take more technology resources. Maybe you need to do some well screening. Maybe, you need to clean your database up a little bit. Maybe you need to clean up your processes. It takes, a greater involvement of the entire organization in some way. The executive director or your president or whatever is going to be spending significantly more time. And so you just have to start thinking about like, well, what do we have in place and what do we need to have in place to do this well, and start to think about that and start to put a budget together, and really think about, well, what does this all look like? And, still the rules of fundraising still apply. Like, I don't know about you, Laurel, but there's lots of times I just get resistance from people on spending money. And I'm not talking about on consultants. I'm talking about on anything. We're like, well, we're trying to raise $15 million, but we're going to argue over every, $3,000 we spend on this and $5,000 we spend on that. So I would encourage all of you to think about what do you really need to be successful, build it into the campaign total, have a budget, and then you don't have to think about it. You can just kind of spend the money up. But the cost per dollar raise for something like this is still going to be somewhere, in the 8 to 20 cents on the dollar kind of range. It's probably lower than, it's probably on the lower end of that if you're doing things well, because this is very major gift focused, but it's not going to be free. It's not going to be, it's not going to be, 1 cent on the dollar, or at least you shouldn't anticipate that it be 1 cent on the dollar. Maybe you can do that if you have a mature program and you're really already have a strong major gift program and you can, plug into that. But for most organizations, it's going to be significantly more than that. And so one option is hiring a consultant who has some experience doing this. And there's other ways. You can also do self-evaluation in some way and think about it as well. And then what do we need a plan. So let's talk about planning, Laurel.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a good plan. I think, ultimately you need a plan that is going to be realistic and workable for you. I often get folks who ask for templates, and I will always provide a template when someone wants one. But ultimately, it has to be something that works for you. And not just the plan, but all of the kind of day-to-day management pieces that go along with actually implementing that plan. So whether that's a RASCI or a MOCA document that's in a timeline form, or something that you're building into a software like Asana, or Microsoft Teams, or something like that, but something that's actually taking this plan and then making it real every single day. Because I think, again, plans can, especially campaign plans, if they're multi-year, there can be this sense of like, well, let's deal with that tomorrow. We'll deal with this today. And inevitably, the thing we deal with tomorrow is the thing that we either don't like doing, or we're afraid to do, or is going to be too hard, right? So we kind of keep just putting off the things that we don't love to focus on the things that we do want to do, or we can do readily, right? And I think by taking your kind of your plan, like, here's all the things that need to get done over the course of the next, say, 3 years, and then putting it into some really practical day-to-day tools, whatever that is that your organization uses, then it's like, nope, Asana is telling me that I have this due today, and I got to do that now. And I will say, you and I were talking about this a little bit about, if we were running a shop today and doing a campaign, and, would I hire campaign counsel, even though we've been campaign counsel ourselves? And yeah, absolutely, I would. And one of the biggest reasons I would hire campaign counsel is to have that person who is checking in with me on a regular basis to say, hey, did you do the thing that we talked about being really important to do? And how can I help you get past any of the roadblocks that are keeping you from getting that thing done, right? I think that's where we provide the most value as campaign counsel, is just being, I have clients tell me all the time, like, oh my gosh, I would never have done that thing, except I knew I was talking to you tomorrow. And
Mm.
I was like, I can't be on a call with Laurel and tell her I didn't do the thing that, like, I said I was going to do, right? And if that's a motivating factor, then I'll take it, right? I mean, I think that's a real benefit. Now, if your team has incredible systems and other folks, I've worked on teams where we had internal folks who served in that capacity very, very well, who were kind of internal, like, okay, everybody, let's go, kind of project managers, right? If you've got that internally, then yeah, you're good. But I think that's probably one of the many things that campaign counsel can do. But I think one of the things we find our clients value most with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, if nothing else, I mean, I think a good campaign counsel will help you with individual donor strategies, will have seen a broad variety of campaigns out there in the world, and just maybe able to help you refine your strategy, and just based on a breadth of experience, help you avoid campaign pitfalls. But I think, the main thing, in many ways, just timekeeping, right? Just keep you moving, as you said before. There's always the day-to-day, there's the day-to-day fire, and there's a fire every day. And, you can go, I think all of you are probably familiar with, waking up 5 months later and you're still in the same place, right? Because there was always these things happening. And so you're doing a good job with your annual fundraising, but it's hard to do those strategic things that are really going to make that transformational difference for your fundraising, in a way that the day-to-day is only going to probably make incremental difference. And so having somebody, whether that's internally or externally, helping you kind of keep that time, I think is really, really important. So yeah, so well, there's obviously lots more that we could talk about, and lots that we didn't talk about in terms of campaign, but I think we hit the main things. But before we sign off, what is there any advice you would give to somebody considering a campaign of whatever kind?
Yeah, again, I think knowing why you're doing it and knowing what you hope to get out of it. That's probably the biggest thing is not looking at campaigns as silver bullets, looking at them as real useful tools to either raise significant funds toward a really exciting vision for your organization, but also seeing the benefits that a campaign can have in boosting your annual giving, in helping to grow your development program, in helping to build development muscle across your staff and your volunteer corps. There's so many benefits of a campaign, but make sure that you are realistic about the outcomes of the campaign, and are doing a campaign for the right reasons. That'd probably be my biggest takeaway. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Have your table of gifts, understand what the gap between the needed prospects are and the number of prospective donors that you currently have. And then that's your plan. How are you narrowing that gap? How are you getting that gap between needed prospects and identified prospects to zero? And that's the core of your campaign plan. That's the core of your interaction with the board. And because that's a quantifiable thing, you want to make sure that your plan is engaging a sufficient number of people. Like, how are you actually going to enroll the number of people required on the table of gifts? And you can measure that out. You can like, this event is going to bring in this number of people that, and X 1 out of 4 of them will become a prospect. You can do that kind of modeling, and you should. Like, this is one of those areas where you don't really have to guess a lot to really have a sense of what's possible and what's going to be a stretch and what's necessary to do. So I think we'll leave it there, Laurel. I think we're gonna talk again soon. I think we're gonna talk mid-level giving, because you have to have a major gift prospect pool in the first place to do to do this. So we'll talk about that next time. But let's leave it there. And thanks everyone for joining us for another TOG chat.
Thanks, everyone.